On a quiet autumn morning, as I organized my schedule in the office, I reflected on how 15 years of practice in urology and andrology had transformed my perspective on human sexuality. The coffee was still steaming in the cup when Mr. Albert, 67 years old, walked into my office. His eyes, though hesitant, carried a determination I had seen in many other patients his age, men who decided to break the silence and seek help for intimate issues. "Doctor," he began, adjusting himself in the chair, "I never imagined I would be here to talk about this." His hands, marked by time, gripped the armrests firmly. But my wife insisted, and after much reluctance, I realized I needed to talk to someone. As a physician specializing in men's health, I have learned that every story carries its own particularities, its delicate nuances that need to be understood beyond the purely clinical aspect. Mr. Albert began to share his concerns. The decrease in sexual desire, the anxiety related to performance, and most importantly, the fear of losing the intimate connection with his wife of 4 decades. "You know, doctor, things used to be much simpler in the past," he continued, his voice carrying a mix of nostalgia and concern. "Now, it seems like my body doesn't respond the way it used to. And there are days when there isn't even, well, you understand, ejaculation." At that moment, I realized it was time to demystify some concepts and present a new perspective on sexuality and maturity. I explained to Mr. Albert that the changes he was experiencing were a natural part of the aging process, but that it didn't mean the end of his sexual life. "Have you ever heard of andropause?" I asked, grabbing some medical illustrations I use to help with understanding. "It is a natural process that occurs with advancing age, where testosterone levels gradually decrease. This can affect various aspects of male health, including sexual function." As I explained, I saw his shoulders relax slightly. Information, when presented clearly and warmly, has the power to ease anxieties and open doors to new possibilities. But I want you to understand something fundamental. Sexuality is not just about physical performance. In maturity, we discover that pleasure and intimacy can manifest in many different ways. I shared with him recent studies on sexuality in later life, explaining how the concept of sexual satisfaction evolves over time. We talked about the importance of communication with one's partner, exploring new forms of intimacy, and the fundamental role of affection and emotional connection. "What many don't realize," I continued, "is that this phase can be a unique opportunity to rediscover intimacy. Without the pressure of performance that often troubles us when we're younger, we can focus on deeper aspects of the relationship." Mr. Albert listened attentively, and gradually I noticed a different sparkle in his eyes. "But is there any treatment, doctor? Something that could help me feel more whole again?" "Yes, there are several therapeutic options we can explore," I replied, picking up my notepad. "But before we discuss specific treatments, we need to conduct a full evaluation. We'll check your hormone levels, run some important tests, and, most importantly, better understand your health history." I explained that the treatment would be personalized, considering not only the physical aspects, but also the emotional ones, and the unique dynamics of his relationship. The goal isn't just to treat symptoms, but to help you rediscover a fulfilling and satisfying sexuality in this new phase of life. At the end of the consultation, I noticed that Mr. Albert left differently than he had entered. His shoulders were more upright, his expression lighter. Before leaving, he turned and said, "You know, doctor, I never thought I could talk about this so openly. Thank you for listening to me." That moment reinforced something I had learned throughout my career. Medicine is not just about treating symptoms or prescribing medications. It's about welcoming, understanding, and guiding people through the different phases of life, helping them find new meanings and possibilities at each step of the way. As I organized my notes from the consultation, I reflected on how many other men like Mr. Albert were silently facing similar issues. Society still carries many taboos about sexuality and maturity, but increasingly, we see people willing to break that silence and seek a fuller, more satisfying life. The week following Mr. Albert's first appointment, I dedicated myself to organizing a series of lectures on sexual health and maturity at the local community center. The experience with him had once again shown me how important it was to create safe spaces to discuss these issues. During the preparation, I received his test results, which revealed a common condition among men his age: testosterone levels at the lower end of the normal range and some mild vascular changes. In our second appointment, Mr. Albert came accompanied by his wife, Mrs. Margaret, a graceful 65-year-old woman with a welcoming smile that immediately brought a lighter atmosphere to the room. "I thought it was important to come along," she said, holding her husband's hand. "After all, we're in this journey together." That simple gesture perfectly illustrated what I always advocate in my clinical practice: the importance of mutual support and open communication between partners. I began by explaining the test results, using clear and accessible language. "The tests show us some natural changes due to age," I explained, pointing to the numbers on a sheet. "But the most important thing is to understand that these changes don't define your sex life. They are just aspects we need to consider to develop the best treatment strategy." Mrs. Margaret interjected, "You know, doctor, over the past few years we've realized we needed to reinvent our intimacy. But sometimes it's hard to know where to start." Her comment opened the door to an essential discussion about adaptation and discovery. I explained how the male body undergoes significant transformations after the age of 60. "It's as if the body is inviting us to explore new forms of pleasure," I remarked. "The absence of ejaculation at times, for example, doesn't mean the absence of pleasure. Some men discover they can experience different and equally pleasurable sensations." I took the opportunity to address a crucial topic: the impact of medications on sexual function. Mr. Albert, like many men his age, was taking medication for high blood pressure and cholesterol. "Some medications can affect sexual function," I explained. "But there are alternatives we can explore together with your cardiologist." The couple listened attentively as I detailed the available therapeutic options. "We have several possibilities," I continued, "from adjustments to the current medication to specific therapies to improve sexual function. The important thing is to find an approach that works for both of you." Mrs. Margaret, with the wisdom of years of companionship, added, "In recent months, we've discovered that touch and affection are just as important as the sexual act itself." Your comment opened up space for us to discuss the importance of non-sexual intimacy and how it can enrich a relationship. "Exactly," I agreed. "Physical intimacy goes far beyond the sexual act. Hugs, caresses, massages, all these forms of touch are essential for maintaining an emotional connection and can be extremely pleasurable." During our conversation, we also addressed the importance of maintaining healthy habits. Sexual health is directly linked to overall body health, I explained. Regular exercise, a balanced diet, and good sleep are crucial at this stage of life. Mr. Albert, who initially seemed hesitant to join the conversation, began to open up. "I started walking every morning with Margaret. I notice that on the days I exercise, I feel more energized in every aspect." This comment allowed me to explain how regular physical activity can improve not only sexual function, but also overall well-being and self-esteem. Exercise increases endorphin production, improves blood circulation, and can help regulate hormone levels, I clarified. Before wrapping up the consultation, we worked together to create a personalized action plan. In addition to the necessary medication adjustments, we included strategies to improve communication between the couple and specific exercises to strengthen intimacy. "Remember," I concluded, "that every couple has their own pace and their own needs. What's important is to keep the dialogue open and be willing to explore new possibilities together." As I watched them leave the office, still holding hands, I reflected on how sexual medicine in maturity goes far beyond treating physical symptoms. It's about helping people recognize that aging, while it brings changes, can also open doors to new ways of experiencing and expressing love and intimacy. In the weeks that followed, I closely monitored Mr. Albert's progress. Albert and Mrs. Margaret. During one of their follow-up appointments, I noticed a significant change in their demeanor. The initial nervousness had given way to a genuine curiosity about the possibilities that lay ahead in this new phase of their lives. "Doctor," Mrs. Margaret began, "we started practicing those intimacy techniques you suggested. At first, I admit, we felt a bit awkward, but gradually we found our own rhythm." Her account was a perfect example of how patience and a willingness to explore new paths can transform the experience of intimacy and maturity. During our conversation, I took the opportunity to introduce a fundamental topic: the importance of self-awareness in this new phase. Our bodies change, and with them, so do our responses to stimuli, I explained. It's like learning to dance to a new song. It takes time, requires practice, and most importantly, demands that we pay attention to the signals our bodies send us. Mr. Albert, who initially seemed reserved when discussing these matters, now actively participated in the conversation. "You know, Doctor, I realized I didn't need to be so hard on myself anymore. When we stop pressuring ourselves, things start to flow naturally." This observation allowed me to address a crucial aspect of treatment: reducing performance anxiety. I explained how stress and excessive worry can negatively interfere with sexual response, creating a vicious cycle of apprehension and frustration. "What you're experiencing is exactly what modern sexual medicine advocates," I commented, sharing some recent studies on the topic. Sexuality and maturity is not a diminished version of youth, but rather a completely new experience with its own characteristics and pleasures. During the consultation, we also discussed the adjustments that had been made to their medications in coordination with their other doctors. "The changes in the blood pressure medication have started to show positive results," reported Mr. Albert. "And those breathing and relaxation exercises you taught have been very helpful." I took the opportunity to introduce some guidance on cardiovascular health and its relationship to sexual function. "The heart and sexual life are closely connected," I explained. "When we take care of one, we naturally benefit the other. The daily walks you've started not only strengthen the heart, but also improve blood circulation throughout the body." Mrs. Margaret shared how the changes in the couple's routine had brought unexpected benefits. "We've started having more quality time together. It's not just about physical intimacy, but about emotional reconnection. We've rediscovered the pleasure of simply being in each other's presence." This comment opened the door for us to discuss how emotional intimacy can amplify physical pleasure. "The brain is our primary sexual organ," I explained. "When we feel emotionally connected and secure, our ability to experience pleasure increases significantly." During our conversation, we also discussed the importance of maintaining a proper sleep routine and a balanced diet. "The body is an integrated system," I emphasized. "Every aspect of our health influences the others. Restorative sleep and proper nutrition are essential for maintaining our energy and vitality." Mr. Albert shared how he had rediscovered pleasure in small moments of daily life. "Before, I saw intimacy as something mechanical, with a specific goal. Now I realize that every touch, every glance, every moment of connection has its own value." This shift in perspective was exactly what I hoped to see in my patients. Maturity offers us the opportunity to transcend the limitations we impose on our own sexuality, I commented. "It's a time to discover that pleasure can manifest in much more varied and profound ways than we imagined." Before concluding the session, we reviewed the progress made and adjusted some aspects of the therapeutic plan. "The important thing is to keep an open mind and maintain fluid communication," I emphasized. "Every small step forward is a victory worth celebrating." As I watched them leave the office, I noticed how they walked closer to each other, exchanging knowing glances that spoke louder than words. It was living proof that intimacy and maturity, when nurtured with care and understanding, can blossom in surprising and rewarding ways. The case of Mr. Albert and Mrs. Margaret inspired me to organize a support group for mature couples at my clinic. In our first meeting, I realized how your experiences could help other couples facing similar challenges. With your permission, I shared some aspects of your journey, obviously preserving your privacy. Sexuality and maturity is still a topic surrounded by myths and prejudices. I began the meeting. But more and more, we see couples willing to break these taboos and seek a more fulfilling and satisfying intimate life. The group was diverse, with couples of different ages and backgrounds, all united by the desire to better understand this phase of life. During the meeting, we addressed practical issues that often arise in the office. One of the participants, a 63-year-old woman, shared her concern about vaginal dryness, a common problem in postmenopause that can affect the couple's intimacy. This allowed me to explain how different aspects of male and female sexual health are interconnected. It is essential to understand that physiological changes affect both partners, I explained. That's why the approach should always be joint, considering the needs and particularities of each one. I presented various therapeutic options available, from lubricants to hormonal therapies, always emphasizing the importance of individualized medical evaluation. Mr. Albert, who had decided to join the group with Mrs. Margaret, surprised everyone with his candor in sharing his experience. At first, I felt less of a man because of the changes I was experiencing, he admitted. But I learned that masculinity isn't just about physical performance. It's about care, connection, and true intimacy. His testimony touched many of those present, especially other men who identified with his feelings. A rich discussion developed about how gender stereotypes and social expectations can affect our experience of sexuality, especially in maturity. What we need to understand, I interjected, is that there is no single standard of normality when it comes to sexual life. Each couple needs to find their own rhythm, their own ways of expressing affection and intimacy. I shared some recent studies that demonstrate how sexual satisfaction in maturity is more related to the quality of communication and emotional connection than to purely physical aspects. During the meeting, we also discussed the importance of keeping the mind active and curious at this stage of life. Sexuality is as much mental as it is physical, I explained. Staying intellectually stimulated, cultivating new interests, and maintaining an active social life are important aspects of a satisfying sexual life. Mrs. Margaret shared how she and Mr. Albert had started taking dance classes together, an activity that not only improved their physical connection, but also brought more joy and spontaneity to their relationship. Dancing helped us rediscover the pleasure of touch, movement, and the synchronicity between our bodies, she reported, eliciting approving smiles from the group. As the meeting progressed, I noticed how the supportive environment allowed people to feel more comfortable asking questions they normally wouldn't even bring up in the doctor's office. We discussed everything from practical aspects, such as the use of medications for erectile dysfunction, to more subjective matters, like rediscovering desire and attraction in the longevity of a relationship. The important thing is to keep an open mind and a willingness to learn, I concluded. Maturity can be a phase of great discoveries and achievements, as long as we are willing to embrace change and adapt our expectations. At the end of the Yakinina meeting, many participants expressed feeling lighter and more hopeful. The sharing of experiences had created a sense of community and mutual understanding, essential for the process of acceptance and adaptation to the changes that maturity brings. Watching the couples say goodbye, exchanging contact information and words of encouragement, I reflected on how modern medicine needs to go beyond treating physical symptoms. True sexual health care involves creating safe spaces for dialogue, promoting ongoing education, and, most importantly, helping people recognize that each phase of life brings its own possibilities for pleasure and fulfillment. 6 months had passed since Mr. Albert's first appointment, and the changes were remarkable. During our follow-up consultation, the couple entered my office with a different energy, lighter and more confident. It was gratifying to see how the collaborative work between doctor and patients could transform not only sexual health, but the entire dynamic of the relationship. "Doctor," Mr. Albert began. "Albert," I want to share something important. Last week, we celebrated 41 years of marriage, and for the first time in a long while, we were able to celebrate in a truly special way. His smile was genuine, reflecting a satisfaction that went beyond the physical aspect. Mrs. Margaret added, "We rediscovered the joy of being together. It's not just about physical intimacy, although that has also improved a lot. It's about a deeper connection, a mutual understanding that we've built over this journey." During our conversation, we reviewed the progress made. The adjustments in medication, combined with lifestyle changes, had produced significant results. Mr. Albert's blood pressure was more controlled, and his energy levels had increased considerably. "Have you been exercising regularly?" I asked, though the answer was evident in his more upright posture and rosier complexion. "3 times a week for water aerobics and daily walks with Margaret," he replied proudly. "Besides that, the dance classes have become our special moment of the week. I never imagined that, at 67, I'd be twirling around the dance floor." I took the opportunity to discuss how regular physical activity not only contributes to cardiovascular health but also to the production of hormones important for well-being and sexual function. "Physical exercise is one of the best remedies we have available," I explained. "It improves blood circulation, increases endorphin production, and strengthens self-esteem." Mrs. Margaret shared how the changes in the couple's routine had positively affected other aspects of their lives. "Our children and grandchildren have noticed the difference. The other day, our daughter mentioned how we seemed more cheerful and energetic. We even started traveling more, something we hadn't done in a long time. It was the perfect moment to address a fundamental aspect of sexual health and maturity, the importance of staying active and engaged with life. Sexuality doesn't exist in a vacuum," I explained. "It's part of a bigger picture, which includes our physical, mental, and emotional health. When we invest in our overall quality of life, we naturally reap the benefits in our intimate lives." During the consultation, Mr. Albert mentioned how transformative his participation in the support group had been. Hearing other people share similar experiences made me realize I wasn't alone, and being able to help other couples with our experience gave new meaning to everything we've been through. This allowed me to address the importance of social support and breaking taboos around sexuality in later life. When we create safe spaces to discuss these topics, we enable more people to seek help and find solutions to their difficulties, I commented. The couple also shared how they had developed new ways of communicating about their needs and desires. "We learned to be more honest with each other," said Mrs. Margaret. "Not just about intimate matters, but about all aspects of our life together. And the most interesting part," added Mr. Albert, "is that this openness brought a new dimension to our intimacy. We discovered that pleasure can manifest in ways we had never imagined before." I took the opportunity to emphasize how this experience perfectly illustrated what modern sexual medicine advocates: the importance of a holistic approach to sexuality, especially in maturity. It's not just about treating physical symptoms, but about promoting a reconnection with oneself and with one's partner. At the end of the consultation, we set new goals for the coming months, always respecting the couple's pace and preferences. "What's important is to maintain this attitude of openness and discovery," I emphasized. "Sexuality and maturity is a continuous journey of learning and adaptation." Watching them leave the office, I realized how cases like theirs reaffirmed my passion for sexual medicine. It was rewarding to see how proper medical care, combined with a sensitive and humanized approach, could help people discover new horizons of pleasure and satisfaction in their lives. On a quiet autumn afternoon, exactly 1 year after our first consultation, I welcomed Mr. Albert and Mrs. Margaret for our annual follow-up meeting. The moment couldn't have been more symbolic. The golden leaves falling outside seemed to celebrate the natural cycle of life, reminding us that each season brings its own beauties and discoveries. "This year has been transformative," began Mrs. Margaret, her eyes shining with a serene joy. "We've learned that aging doesn't mean giving up on love or pleasure. On the contrary, we discovered that maturity can bring a unique depth to our intimacy." Mr. Albert, who a year ago entered my office with tense shoulders and a worried look, now displayed a calm confidence. "You know, doctor, I realized I was so focused on what I had lost that I couldn't see all we still had to live and discover together." During our conversation, we reviewed not only the medical aspects of his treatment, but also the significant changes that had occurred in their lives. The couple had become one of the most active pillars of the support group, helping other couples navigate their own journeys of rediscovery. "The group has become a second family for us," shared Mrs. Margaret. "Seeing other couples overcome similar challenges gives us strength and makes us realize we are not alone in this journey." I took the opportunity to discuss how their experiences could help demystify sexuality in later life. "You are living proof that love and intimacy can flourish at any age, as long as there is understanding, patience, and a willingness to adapt to changes." Mr. Albert shared how his perspective on masculinity and sexual satisfaction had transformed. "Before, I measured my virility by the standards of youth. Today, I understand that true strength lies in the ability to reinvent oneself, to find new ways to express love and desire." Our conversation expanded to broader topics about quality of life and maturity. The couple had incorporated healthy practices into their daily routine, from regular exercise to moments dedicated exclusively to cultivating intimacy. "We've created our own rituals," explained Mrs. Margaret. "Twice a week, we set aside special time just for us. Sometimes it's a candlelit dinner, other times a relaxing bath together. The important thing is to keep the flame of connection alive." This observation allowed me to emphasize a crucial point. Intimacy and maturity is not limited to moments of sexual expression. It is a continuum of gestures, touches, and words that keep the couple emotionally connected. We also discussed how changes in their intimate life had positively impacted other aspects of their health. Mr. Albert's tests showed significant improvements in his cardiovascular indicators, and both reported better sleep quality and reduced stress levels. "It's interesting how everything is interconnected," commented Mr. Albert. "When we started taking care of our intimate life, we noticed improvements in various aspects of our health and well-being." At the end of our consultation, I asked them to share what advice they would give to other couples facing similar challenges. Mrs. Margaret responded without hesitation. "I would tell them not to be afraid to seek help, and most importantly, to keep their hearts open to new discoveries. Each phase of life has its own joys and pleasures," Mr. Albert added, "and don't let prejudices or shame prevent you from living fully. Life is too precious to waste time on fears and insecurities." His words perfectly summarized the message I always strive to convey in my medical practice. Sexuality and maturity is not the end of a journey, but the beginning of a new adventure, filled with possibilities for connection and discovery. As I watched them leave, I reflected on how stories like theirs contributed to a necessary shift in how our society views aging and sexuality. Every couple that overcame their fears and prejudices paved the way for others to do the same, creating a positive cycle of transformation and acceptance. Mature love, as I've learned throughout my career, has a unique beauty. It is a love that transcends physical limitations, finds strength in shared vulnerability, and constantly renews itself through mutual understanding and the desire to keep growing together.